Okay. He's good for something. Be that person. Yeah, actually. It's terrible. So they give CCG. So, social yeah, because you gotta wait.
How are you today?
Well, in between. Coming up now, if you want to do open the meeting or do invocation, we'll start.
Wait till you get here.
Okay.
What is that? I started without.
Pat, sit on the,
What's that?
so y'all can watch the presentation.
Don't you run for them cameras.
Yeah, I was watching all the squares a little for about the last 10 or 15 minutes.
Fine, that's fine. Is Dean already hooked in? We sure he's already hooked in?
If you like it.
Over here, you know, the square back over there, what's that have?
Press conference.
Yeah, he is.
He's there.
Oh, there he is, okay.
Other side of
No,
that.
I just want to make sure he's in.
Yes, yeah, I'm on it.
All right, good morning. Thank all of you for being here as we get ready to do our workshop. Let me do first order of business, let us stand and have prayer. Pledge of allegiance. Most holy and everlasting Father, our God, it's in the holy and precious name of Jesus that we come to say thank you for allowing us the health, the strength, but most of all, God, the wisdom and the understanding to carry out the business here at Chatham County. Bless us now in the meeting that we are about to receive. The information we have received will be a blessing to our soul. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. And now we will turn the agenda over to Mr. Mandia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Got several things on the agenda today that we want to go over. And the first being, I know that a number of commissioners have questioned the ownership of certain parcels over there at Hutchinson Island and why we're involved with the repairs of the river wall. So what I did, instead of going on memory and going through our files, I asked someone to come to the meeting that you all know, Mr. Pat Monahan, who actually was the chief architect of the Trade Center over at Hutchinson Island and did most of the work. And Pat probably knows more about that island than most people. So I asked him to come in and do a little brief presentation to you and then answer any questions, and then we'll follow up. We have a meeting today with Mark Smith and his group this afternoon at 2:30, so we're going to be in some further negotiations, but I asked Pat to come today to give you just some background and kind of give you a history of where we are and answer any questions you may have. So, Mr. Monahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners and staff.
You want that file pulled up?
I retired 11 years ago, and it's like a homecoming. I come back, and it's same places but different faces. But Michael called me and asked me if I would review with you the history, and so I've in your package you will find a compilation of both the transactions through the years, beginning with the CSX's donation of 25 acres for the Trade Center development, as well as the riverfront development. And in with that, you will also see a map. And essentially, just to summarize it all, the county owns very little on Hutchinson Island in terms of holding title. Most of the county's assets became part of a lease agreement with various entities, most principally the Georgia International, what used to be called the Georgia International Maritime Trade Center Authority, which now is a state authority. And through that, through the bonds that the state participated in the construction of the Trade Center, which was $17.7 million back in the late 1980s, the county was required to convey the Trade Center property to the authority. At that point, it was a local authority, which has subsequently become a state authority. So that includes what is known as Parcel A, which is the Trade Center Authority and the parking lot. However, because bonds were issued, the county retained ownership of Parcel 1A, which is the riverfront, as well as the parking garage. However, those parcels, the county leased to the Trade Center Authority through a lease agreement back in the early 2000, and then I think it was amended in later years. And if you have any questions about the leases, here's the man to talk to. He wrote the leases. And I think it was in the best interest of the community that the county did lease those properties. I don't think the county had any need for ownership. But of course now, fast forward, as I told Michael yesterday, I reminded him it's been 25 years since we started that project, and it just celebrated its 23rd anniversary, or will celebrate its 23rd anniversary on May 1st. So it's been a decades-long community investment. I think it's paid off well just by virtue of the fact that the state is investing at least between $250 and $280 million for the expansion. I think that shows, if nothing else, that it's been a success. I don't know if you want me to address specific points, or you got questions, or how you want to proceed from this point, but my time is your time.
Trying to get the map up.
Oh, map. Okay. There is a map in your package, I think it's on page 1, that principally shows just the property. You'll notice the property that's the large, as I mentioned, the large Trade Center Authority property is the Trade Center location in the parking lot. That's known as Parcel 1 in the Savannah Harbor subdivision plat. It's not shown, but the riverfront, I think you'll see it is noted as Parcel 1A. And then kind of ironically, Chatham County owns all 3 of the slips, slip 1, 2, and 3. You still hold title to all the slips. Slip 1 is that slip that's immediately east of the Weston that is being developed currently with Savannah Harbor Associates, which is John Kay's development group, about a $130 million investment. And then slip 2, which you don't notice, but that's a little inlet for the water ferry system. That slip originally extended about 1,500 feet deep, but it was closed in through fill and geotech fabric. And then slip 3, that's the 20 acres that encompasses parcel 7. But the county owns all 20 acres, including 13 acres of slip 3, which is water. And that property is, there is an easement for it used to be Low Country LLC. I don't know who owns the western part of that slip. But the eastern part was then leased to the Trade Center Authority. And then part of that was also conveyed to CAT as a matching grant for Federal Transportation Authority funding to allow the intermodal center.
we have a better map on the screen, and it outlines, the ownership of various areas. And I think the question was, Pat, that for at least some of the commissioners as to, we were going to at some point turn that over to the city, and that never happened. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
So the original plan in the subdivision plat, and the reason we subdivided the riverfront from the rest of the property was just that fact, that we built it, and I met with Michael Brown and the then Public Works Director, and they were willing to accept it as long as the county engaged a contractor to lift up all the pavers and re-smooth the sand to regrade it after, this was probably 2 or 3 years after the convention center opened, which the county then did. But, as time flies on, the Public Works Director retired, Mr. Brown retired, and memories are short without any written agreement. But it was always the intent that the city of Savannah would manage that, just as it manages the entry roads to the convention center.
Now, we are in the process of, fixing the cave-in, and we've got a significant amount of money invested in that. So I think several commissioners, inquired as to, what benefit are we getting having spent that, those dollars to fix it. The county's not getting anything from it. So that's going to be an ongoing question. Like I said, we're meeting with the convention center folks this afternoon, and hoping we can work out something. But nobody stepped up to the plate as of yet to help us with that, and that's a significant expense that the county's bearing.
I thought that we were getting some state money for that.
Well, that's still in the works. So we requested, we went to state and the feds, and that's in the works. But we don't have the money in the bank as of yet.
Was there a positive response?
Well,
Has there been any response?
well, they said everybody's willing to help, even in terms of when being the chairman met with the governor. Everybody is willing, but the check's not in the bank yet.
I did, when I met with Michael and Linda recently, I did outline a couple options for the county to pursue, and I don't want to state those publicly because I don't want to tip the hand when Michael and Linda and the chairman negotiate with Mr. Smith and the authority. But there are some options the county has. The county still has an interest in not only the riverfront, but parcel 7 and the parking garage. So there may be an exchange of properties involved that might at least eliminate any future county responsibility for the riverfront. In addition, like I said, there's some other options I've discussed with them that I don't want to discuss publicly.
And I think one of the board members talked about not even doing any additional work over there, and that is an option.
And I mentioned that as an option, so he said it, I did.
But I don't think that, in terms of the community as a whole and us getting into the state, putting the money into expanding the convention center and potential of a new convention center hotel over there, just leaving that hole there, I'm not sure that's an option. But, that I would recommend, but that's certainly something, I think one of the commissioners brought that up as an option, just stopping work right now, but that's not something staff's recommending.
Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I want to thank our county manager for being nice and not naming me specifically there. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. Yes, Pat, that would have been me, which you were there with me for many years, and you know how financially conservative I am anyway. So, so basically, all of this is great that we're getting an update. We're at this point, we're not receiving any help with this one.
Well, we haven't, like I said, we've gotten some response that folks understand our plight, and they have, said they're going to try to help us, but like I said, we don't have any firm commitments as of yet.
How many millions a year does Savannah make off of that now that they annexed it? Do we know from property taxes or anything, just the whole area?
Looked, and of course, I've not taken a direct interest in the development for a number of years. The city of Savannah was earning about $1.5 million in property taxes and hotel motel taxes.
How much of that? I can barely hear you for some reason.
camera is.
Yeah,
About,
About 1.5 million annually in property tax and hotel motel tax.
I think most of that's,
Okay.
yeah.
And that's been going on for how many years now?
well, since the hotel opened in the year 2000. Yeah. Actually, the hotel opened in 1999.
So 20,
23 years, so $30 million roughly. And how much money were we asked to spend on fixing the thing that was falling in the other day? 11 million?
between 11 and 12 million dollars is the current estimate.
How much, I mean, so we've lost our millage rate for unincorporated is probably less than half of Savannah's. But so we can combine that. They basically took away the, say, 15 million that we would have actually made when we invested in that property before they annexed it. And now with the other 10,000, so Savannah's roughly cost us $25 million at this point on just that alone, I guess you might say.
I guess that's one way to look at it. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I think since we're elected to represent the county guys and not elected to represent Savannah, we need to stop throwing money down the toilet. And that's all I got to say. Thank you for holding the meeting. And you know, we've done this long enough, and we need to stop the insanity now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Manager, how much the lease that the county has with whomever is holding the parking garage, how much does the county get for that
We don't
lease?
get any revenue off the
No.
parking garage, no.
Nothing.
That was also leased to the Trade Center Authority, which then in turn leases it to the Weston.
All right, and then how long is the lease for?
The original lease was not 50 years as allowed by the Constitution. I think it was 40 years, but strangely enough, I went on vacation once for a couple weeks, and I came back and there was an amended lease. And I think that amended lease might be like for 30 years, something like that.
We're in the process of looking at those
yeah.
now.
Gotcha. And my last question, as it relates to the slip where CAT uses, do we lease that to CAT, or do we just hold that and have a IGA, or excuse me, an MOU with CAT for accessing the slip that we own?
Well, county owns the title.
Cat owns that.
The CAT property was, the county conveyed that, and that's noted in the conveyance. It's, I think, parcel 7A and parcel 7B. The county conveyed that property to allow Chatham Area Transit to pursue a federal grant. And CAT did not use its own resources, but instead it used the value of the land as an in-kind match in order to obtain the Federal Transportation Authority grant.
And that's where, you see where they built the transfer station down there? That's where buses come in, unload, and then they'll go over to the new hotel when it's built.
So what I'm talking about is where the ferry's docked though,
That's slip 2.
which is county owned, right?
Yes.
Right, so that's what my question was pertaining to.
With the Trade Center Authority, I think, I'm trying to remember if that's
not, we
included
can't.
or not. Or maybe, but I think the Trade Center Authority in turn has leased that to CAT, where the water ferry docks are located at the former side of Slip 2. You'll see it, it's between the Weston and the Trade Center.
All right, so just so I have this clear, we own that slip, we lease it to the Weston,
Authority.
Authority.
to the authority, they lease it to they then sublease it to the Weston. And we get,
The parking garage.
no, I'm talking about the ferry dock.
Where CAT is, they sublease it to CAT.
Is, I'm trying to remember, I know that property's leased to the authority, which I think in turn has some agreement with CAT to run to operate the ferry station.
So with all these lease agreements, the responsibility to maintain them still falls on us though?
Yes, sir. I think the way the leases are structured, the county retains, the authority receive all rights of ownership but title, which means, yes, you're stuck with the maintenance.
And that's one of the things that we want to since we don't have any more, we don't get any revenue, we don't have any more say-so, one of the things that we want to do is convey that to the state and let them be responsible for the maintenance.
Thank you.
But in conveyance, we want to make up some of our loss, right?
Correct. And
We're just not gonna convey it to them.
That's part of the negotiations that we're gonna have when we meet
Right.
with the faith and authority folks.
Plus, I think the attorney needs to speak to, so that all of us understand, you need to speak about what our liability is there too.
Well, county owns it, so it's titled in our name. So in order to bring a negligence suit, that would be pretty difficult to bring against the county because we have sovereign immunity. The main thing we've got is a maintenance responsibility on that Riverwalk and a maintenance responsibility on that garage. And that's where your future money's gonna go. I strongly recommend that we put together a deal in which the county divests itself of its ownership of anything on Hutchinson Island and either let the city take care of it or let the state take care of it, because all the benefits flow in the opposite direction of us.
So, how much have we spent in maintenance, say, over the last 10 years or so, as it relates to the garage and the waterfront?
I think this is the only time that we've done, well, no, I'll take that back. We did do work on the pavers out in front of the Trade Center about 6 years ago, was it, Suzanne? About 6 years ago. And I can get you that, what we spent.
Dollar amount.
Yeah.
So what kind of a figure are we looking at when we talk about conveying
That's
this
to be,
over?
that's to be negotiated. We got some leverage now, but we want to
But
have
will
some
it
discussion.
cover some of what,
We're looking at some revenue that we'll get over the years that will help recoup what we put into it over this time and what we did 6 years ago.
okay, so it wouldn't be one lump sum?
No, ma'am, I don't anticipate it to be one lump sum. I think it'd be something that we get over time.
Okay.
Let's kind of get those numbers for everybody, all right? And what I mean by those numbers is let's get what we've already put in. Right now, we spend what, about
About 8?
Almost 8.
about $8 million because of that wall shifting? All right, so we need to put all those numbers together and then project where we need to go, all right? If you can get that and get it to the board, before we say anything about that publicly, let's get it to everybody so that we can understand where we are, what we've done, and what our liability is, because that's the only reason right now we are stuck in there, is because when our wall shift, there's liability that belongs. And I know, we can go with the sovereign immunity thing, but there's still some liability there, right? Am I correct in what's told?
We got a maintenance obligation
Okay. All right,
that's alive.
Yeah. See, so what we need to do is we need to get those figures. I don't think we need to throw out a number or hurriedly say anything and don't have facts and figures to back us up. So if you all will get that and get it to the commission as soon as you can, and then we're gonna have that conversation today, but we're not gonna come up with no final numbers or nothing like that. We're gonna have to find out where we stand. Now, we do have favor response from both the feds and the state, but they just have not put that dollar amount in there now. And I say this too, with the feds, it has to go through that process. So I don't look to hear anything from them definitely until around October. But we have been in the room and have talked to them about that because with CAT using it, and CAT is the public transportation for the county, all right? That means that we can ask from the transportation department for funds to help us recoup what we've already put in there, all right? So that's where we stand right now. But even from the state, we've got to wait until they work out all their logistics before they give us a definite number. And that's the last thing we got from them, okay?
Mr. Chairman?
Wait a minute, hold on. Commissioner Farrell.
So the county leased land to a third party with no revenue source, but retained the obligation for maintenance. Can I get an explanation, reaching back 20 years, what the rationale was for leasing out something with zero income, but all liability toward the county?
So as I mentioned, the original plan and the reason for the subdividing of the properties into multiple parcels was to convey that interest to the city of Savannah. And let the city of Savannah control that riverfront. There's almost, there was originally 1,000 linear feet of Riverwalk, which has also been expanded by the Riverwalk around Slip 1 and around Slip 3. So there's almost close to a mile of Riverwalk now. And yes, you should be concerned about that, just as the city of Savannah is concerned about its Riverwalk on the south side of the river. Because those Riverwalks, marine construction's expensive. You know, the original Trade Center Riverwalk cost $2,000 a linear foot. The Slip 1 Riverwalk costs $4,000 a linear foot. You go over to the city of Savannah, the Riverwalk at Riverside costs $7,000 a square foot, a linear foot. And the Slip 1 Riverwalk was at $8,000 a linear foot. It's not getting any cheaper to build. The other advantage is that the county has Corps of Engineers maintenance agreements on Slip 1 and Slip 3. Now, that may be a negotiating point. If the county could abdicate its responsibility for those maintenance agreements and they can't be renewed. The Corps of Engineers will not renew a maintenance agreement within the Savannah slips. That may be another negotiating point. But to get back to your question, yes, there was a plan originally. That plan just was not fully executed. And that was that the city of Savannah would accept responsibility for all of the riverfront, not just that part of the convenience.
Yes, it manages.
So let me get this clear. So we had a lease, and it was never followed through by the two parties to, why wasn't it done during the period of the lease itself?
The lease was for the building and the parking lot. That was with the authority. The riverfront / Esplanade was a different, that's actually an easement. If you look in the record, it's an easement. It is not, it was handled differently. And the reason it was an easement, because the original plan was for the county to convey that easement to the city of Savannah, to allow the city of Savannah to use it same as River Street, to market it for festivals and for other uses. And the city and the Convention Center Authority did that at one time. They've held a number of, I think there was like a beer festival or something, I didn't go, but something of that magnitude on the riverfront.
I thought I saw you there, though.
You might see me with the beer, but you didn't see me.
Old enough.
I think that, going back from memory, all this happened when we were trying to develop, and we were trying to get it done. And I think they had changed in administration over the city and a lot of things. When they changed administration, they didn't want to take it over, and we were kind of stuck with it. But it was all because we were the entity that took the lead in doing that development over there.
So we're in a difficult position right now, and is the plan to divest ourselves of ownership, now that the project is complete, and as the lead agency for creating the Savannah Convention Center, our part is completed as a commission, county commission?
I think in talking with the chairman and staff, our goal is correct to divest ourselves of that. Now, we've got some assets that are worth something over there that we're negotiating with, because the plan was always to develop a convention center hotel with the expansion that the state's doing. So I think you're aware of that, and that's something we're going to talk to them about.
Okay, because obviously just continuing on the same path is not in the best interest of the county commission.
I don't think we can afford it, sir.
I would also remind you that the county invested in the three utility extensions under the Savannah River. We got the permitting, we got the approval from the state, through the legislature, and we signed an agreement with the city of Savannah that the county receives, anytime there's a connection, the county receives a reimbursement for its development work, which last time I looked is somewhere between $3,500 and $4,000 per ERU. So I would just remind staff, because I had to remind the city the last time, you owe us a check, but with the K development, the county should be receiving a check as a reimbursement for its ERU connections. Just as a reminder, because last time I had to send a letter to the city to remind them of that obligation. And it's in the city's revenue ordinance, but it's overlooked.
I think internal audit has looked at that.
Yeah, it should be somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000.
And for all of us now, we weren't here 25 years ago or 30 years ago when all this stuff was being done. So if you're not gonna spend time reading up on it, all right, you're still gonna get caught in the dark. And so that's why we were reaching out to find out exactly what our liability is, how long can it stand, and then how can we diverse ourselves away from that, okay? Because we don't get not one penny of the hotel motel, nor any other entity that go over there. I don't think nobody anticipated, even though their thought was is that one day the city was gonna take over everything. I don't think nobody thought about them annexing the whole thing as they did. And we have honestly, no repercussion once that annexation take place. See, so we're trying to get ourselves out of a bad situation. It is a bad situation, and I don't mind saying that publicly or privately, because we're getting stuck with the bill. But when we sat to the table, and we all were at the meeting, and we talked about all the entities in there, the Westin, the city of Savannah, the county, and the authority, all coming together to take care of that cave-in, all right? Nobody has showed up yet. Folks are ducking and dodging, but they haven't showed up yet as far as helping us take care of that. That's why we went to the state, and that's why we went to the federal, all right? To see if we can't get some help in doing that, because I think in the end, Suzanne, you probably can answer this more than I think, or you or Linda One can answer this more for the commission. I think by the time we can get that thing straight and get it up to code and up to par, we're gonna be down spend about, what, $15 million?
We're estimating now about 12, but yes.
Yeah, okay.
The city just got an increase on their hotel
Hey,
motel
listen,
tax.
I'm just putting the facts on the table, that's all I'm doing.
Just
all
to
right.
throw that out there.
Yeah.
While one is being built, a new one's being built.
Well, you know, and see, that's one of the things that, as we look at these agreements now, none of us were at the table to negotiate these agreements and things and like Pat says, he have to go and remind folks that they owe us, and that they should be sending checks this way, all right? So even in the conversation with Mr. K and his development and things, we reminded them of those kinds of things so that they'll be reminded of where the county is and what the county looks for, because we just can't keep dipping into the till. Sure, go.
So, we leased the parking lot to the Trade Center. Trade Center leased it to the West End. So somebody's getting some revenue for that lease, right?
Yeah, and I've asked Mr. Monahan, we're gonna go back and update the report, and we'll get that to you, and then we'll have all that answered in report. So there are leases, but as I remember, I don't think the county was getting any revenue, because that was a part of getting the hotel done and the Trade Center done.
But you don't know how long the lease was.
That's what we got to update and find out.
Probably in here.
We need to terminate the lease.
I think
If it's 30 years, you still, and that's just the 23rd, so you still got 7 more to go. You know, I mean, that's just. But if it was 40 years, you got 13 more to go. So you know, you can figure.
Any other questions?
we have another topic you want to.
Yeah, and then let's just thank Mr. Monahan for taking our time with your retirement schedule.
It's been always a wealth of knowledge, so anytime I forget about something or want to ask, I just call Mr. Monahan, he's always down there on the spot.
Did y'all just
he's
record?
telling me
Did y'all
I'm
just record all of that? Did y'all just record all of that?
It's recorded.
Being recorded.
Thank you.
All right?
Next, and I want to go a little bit out of order. Next, I want to do our indoor recreation study. I'm going to turn it over to Steve to introduce our consultant.
As you know, we hired CSL for our indoor recreation study. Joel Feldman is from Minnesota. Him and his team has worked up a good study. I reviewed it, it looks good. Patrick Graham is also with CHA. He's helping us with this too. He's local. He helped us with the Memorial Stadium project and the Jennifer Ross project, and Buck. So we're very familiar with Patrick. I'm gonna just turn it over to Joel and let him do his thing. Thank you, Joel.
Patrick is gonna have a brief introduction here.
Joel is pulling up the presentation. Again, I'm Patrick Graham. I'm Vice President and Senior Project Manager with the Sports Design Group within CHA Consulting. I am based right here in Savannah, just about a block and a half away. Appreciate your time, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, this morning. We've been working on this study for the Indoor Rec Center for about a year. It started off small, thinking 2 courts, maybe 4 courts, and now obviously it has grown over the year.
Yes.
And, at one point it became clear that we needed to bring in some additional expertise to look at the financial components of this type of a facility, because when you get to 12 courts, you're talking about a facility that now is being supported by sports tourism dollars, so bringing in travel teams, bringing in tournaments, things like that. And so when that came as an option, CHA, we turned to CSL, who has been a partner of ours for a number of years on a number of different projects. They specialize in sports and recreation and convention facilities, and particularly doing business pro formas on those type of facilities and evaluating them from a feasibility assessment standpoint. So I will at this point turn it over to Joel. I may pop in with a couple of things here and there, but I'll let Joel take it from here in terms of his presentation. It's some excellent work, and I hope you will enjoy it.
Thank you, Patrick, Mr. Kagler, Steve. Commissioners, thank you very much. It's good to see you all again. Thank you also for the lovely weather that you guys passed up for a Minnesota boy to come down here and enjoy. To build off of what Patrick was saying, and just to reintroduce you to CSL, we are based in Minneapolis. We've got offices in Frisco, Texas, and Chicago. We have been around for 35 years. We specialize in working with communities that are looking into potential investment into some sort of a public assembly facility. Work with understanding the market, first and foremost, what's the right type of facility, what's the right makeup, an amount of space that is supportable within the community. And then, what is it going to cost to develop, what is it going to cost to operate, what is the return on investment? Most of these projects that are led by the public sector are ones that are endeavored to either pursue quality of life enhancement or creating some opportunity for generating economic benefit back to the community. And in the case with the indoor recreation center that we're looking at here, we really intended to do both. So understanding what the market is for both opportunities, how does that fit in with Chatham County and the Savannah marketplace, and candidly, does it make sense? As an independent third-party consulting firm, we are not operators, we're not developers, we're not architects. So if the answer is no, we've got a strong track record of coming back and saying that there are other endeavors that would be better suited for the funds that you guys have available to you to help further your community. As part of our research process, we took a 7-step approach, taking first and foremost a look at what infrastructure and what's the foundation from which we're building off of here in the local community, both from a demographics, socioeconomic standpoint, facilities, visitor industry infrastructure such as hotels, restaurants, attractions, amenities, from a visitor standpoint, how exciting is this destination? Taking a look at the regional marketplace and the competition that exists for these sports tourism and tournaments and competitions. Taking a look at industry trends and comparable venues throughout the country. What lessons can we learn from other venues and the way that they're operating to translate back to here to what we might be able to expect in Chatham County? And then importantly, doing outreach to a variety of different potential user groups, whether they're basketball, volleyball, wrestling, cheer, dance, martial arts, tournament and meet and organizers, indoor track organizers, meet organizers, to understand from their standpoint, if we were to build a venue here in Chatham County, would they come and visit? Would they come back? Is it something that they're gonna try the shiny new penny on the block once and probably go back to what they've been doing? Or is this something that they can envision bringing back and growing their tournament and their meet for many years to come? There's a lot of opportunity that we noted right off the bat in terms of developing a greater space for not only quality of life enhancement within the community itself, within, and specifically within the visitor industry. There's a very strong visitor industry presence within the Chatham marketplace, and there's a funding source that could potentially be tapped into in order to support both operations and the construction of this complex. As we look at the visitor industry and we look at hotel base, there's a variety of different opportunities and options throughout the marketplace. In many communities across the country that are looking for these types of complexes, when we take a look at the visitor industry, we don't see that infrastructure that exists today. We do have a much more heavy focus on from a local standpoint and a local use standpoint. From Chatham County, from the greater Savannah marketplace, there's a tremendous opportunity to help spur some additional economic benefit just because we've got this existing base of tourism assets and infrastructure. By virtue of bringing in a facility like this, a lot of communities are looking at these types of complexes to spur tourism growth, to start up something. What the fact of the matter is these types of complexes really help to bolster what you already have in place. People that are attending tournaments and meets and opportunities really are looking for the destinations and the places to host these events where they have the infrastructure already there and ready to go, and they have the opportunity to have a level of competition that's commensurate with what they're looking for. Having this foundation of infrastructure right now really positions you well to capture that economic benefit back to the community and create some dollars being brought into the market that otherwise wouldn't be here. Taking a look at local facilities from a community standpoint, one of the things that we noticed, we don't really have that critical mass of a complex in town today where we can host these larger tournaments where we're attracting dozens and dozens and hundreds of teams into the community. In fact, a lot of the spaces that we have are really being overburdened because we have so much demand from a local community standpoint. We're not even able to accommodate that group, much less start bringing in these outside tourism dollars. So overall, from a community standpoint, there's a lot of positives that we're seeing just from a foundational standpoint in terms of the population base, the growth opportunity within the marketplace, from a visitor industry standpoint, from a standpoint of being able to generate that sports tourism and economic impact within the community, and taking a look both from an indoor court standpoint and an indoor track standpoint. Another point that we notice is that there's no indoor track complex both within this community or throughout the regional marketplace, which is the next stage that we started taking a look at is how do we position ourselves relative to other communities throughout the southeast region. From an indoor court standpoint, there are very few facilities within a couple hundred miles that have that critical mass and have that opportunity to bring in these tournaments and meets and competitions. From an indoor track standpoint, really there's hardly anything down in the southeast region in terms of that indoor 200-meter track from a competitive standpoint. So really there's a foundation for us to go out and explore the opportunities to bring in these meets and these tournaments and these activities into the market. Furthermore, from a local standpoint, we see a pretty strong level of contribution, participation rates in a variety of different sports, whether it's basketball, cheerleading, volleyball, martial arts, pickleball, that from a community standpoint, we serve a need by providing this type of space for the local community to be able to operate and utilize as an asset. In terms of some of the lessons learned in terms of some of the comparable venues throughout the country, we took a look at some of the indoor court complexes specifically that have 10 to 12 courts and the way that they're operating. Many of these facilities are both used as a local benefit, local community benefit, but also are there to generate economic impact within the community. For example, the Virginia Beach Sports Center is a great opportunity where they've got multiple courts and the indoor track, and having conversations with the operators there and understanding the way that they're operating. I'm certainly happy to answer questions about some of these specific facilities and the way that they're operating and how it can potentially translate here. But Virginia Beach, Myrtle Beach, there's a lot of these complexes throughout the country that are at the forefront of the evolution of the sports tourism industry, and what are some of the lessons that we can learn. And really one of the big pieces is, again, having that destination, having an operator that understands the marketplace for being able to attract these events and what the needs are of the local community, be able to work hand in hand with the local community in order to manage the space appropriately for what the goals are for the community from a quality of life standpoint, but also understanding the balance with that and the visitor industry. As we're looking at these venues, it's really critical to understand Monday through Thursday, we're really trying to support that local community perspective. Fridays and Sundays, we're trying to generate that economic benefit. How do we balance that out? Because there's a lot of families that are out there that would like to be able to participate in basketball and volleyball and wrestling and indoor track meets on the weekends as well. So having an operator and having that control over the operations of the complex from a community standpoint is critical to make sure to implement as we move forward. Demographically, socioeconomically, we did a broad comparison of how we stack up relative to other communities that operate these venues. We're well within the range for which we would anticipate seeing a strong positive response rate both from the local community and an economic standpoint among these complexes to support stable operations from a community standpoint. One of the things that these charts don't show is really the visitor industry impact that we have within this community and the opportunity that we would anticipate seeing from dollars coming in from outside of the area, and the way in which Savannah and Chatham County are viewed regionally and nationally as a destination, not only for tourism, but also for potentially sports tourism moving forward. Taking a look at comparable indoor track complexes, one of the things that we had a very significant challenge in finding are heavy prevalence of these types of communities, these types of complexes in communities throughout the southern and southeast region of the United States. Part of the reason for that is a lot of these venues are located at colleges and universities. They've got a primary tenant that has a specific need for that indoor track with a program that they're already running within their given community that helps to support the financial burden of operating this purpose-built complex. The other piece is, looking outside and the weather that y'all experience down here, a lot of people are looking for those outdoor track and are more than happy to run outside. If they can't run outside, sometimes they just take the day off and use that opportunity to rest and recover. There are opportunities that we have seen in such places throughout the country that have those indoor track meets, but one of the things that we did note from these venues is that there can be a significant subsidy in terms of operating those complexes versus some of the dedicated indoor court facilities that we were noting earlier. Having that local community support is also a critical piece, and one of the things that we did notice here too is that demographically, socioeconomically, we don't stack up nearly as well to the indoor track markets as we do to the indoor court markets to be able to support it from a local community standpoint. So overall, after we've looked at and created that foundation from a community perspective, as we looked at industry trends, as we start having these conversations with first and foremost the stakeholders and community members and understanding what the opportunities are here in Chatham County to develop and operate this type of space. One of the things that we noted was a significant population base, a growing population base, a strong economy with the ports, with the hospitals, with the educational piece, a destination, an economic center of operations, where there's a very diverse and growing economy that, as we see it moving forward, has a tremendous opportunity to continue to grow moving forward. Strong presence within the visitor industry, certainly a tremendous benefit. Every time I've come in an hour out of Savannah, the flights have been full. And they're not the small little regional jet carriers. We're talking the 200, 250 people per plane. And every single one of them is full coming in and out. This is a destination that people are looking to come to already on a regular basis. Being able to leverage that moving forward, I think is a tremendous opportunity. Some of the challenges that we've noted: per capita income in the community is potentially a challenge in terms of supporting a sports tourism or a community rec center destination. Finding ways to leverage the dollars coming in from outside does present an opportunity to recoup some of those dollars and overcome some of those. Some of the strength of the visitor industry, you could also take a look at that and say that that's a challenge that we're presented with as well, in the sense that hotels are already full. You have high rates at some of the downtown historic district hotel properties. So making sure that we have enough hotel inventory, making sure that we have the right price points and the right types of properties for the families that are coming in, that are looking to experience the sports tourism and the facilities that we're offering, is going to be something that we're going to need to take into consideration as we're locating and designing this space. Overall, after we completed our surveys of dozens of different potential user groups from a variety of different sports, indoor recreation sports users, basketball, volleyball, wrestling, cheer, dance, and indoor track, overall demand facility focus really was strong among core user groups. Had a tremendous opportunity from that perspective in terms of both local programming and a demand and desire to be used by outside tournament operators that are looking to host 2- and 3-day tournaments here on a consistent regular basis. Furthermore, they said that not only would they look to grow the tournaments that they're currently operating, but they would look to move some of them out of other destinations into Chatham County, because they would anticipate having a better experience and a better draw in this market than they would at some of the venues that they're going to. From an indoor track standpoint, the demand that we noted there was a little bit more moderate. There was more of a sense that there would be an opportunity to host some tournaments, some meets, indoor meets throughout the year. The challenge that we face is that from a training standpoint, from an operational standpoint, the user groups really were more interested in having the outdoor training space. They'd rather be outside running rather than inside if they can help it, and dedicating that indoor space to having a 200-meter track and indoor complex presented a challenge. When we spoke to the Virginia Beach Center and their operator, the Eastern States Management, who operates their complex, one of the specific things that they said to us when we asked them about it was, if you could go back and do it over again, would you still build that 200-meter indoor track that's so successful? And they said flat out, no. They're losing money by reserving the space for that complex, and that's in a northern climate, a much more populous location. But they would not want to have that there. They have enough demand from an indoor court standpoint that it really doesn't translate here. And when we spoke to the folks throughout the greater Southeast Regional Marketplace that are looking at developing these indoor track meets, there really wasn't as much of an opportunity down here as they're seeing up in some of the northern markets. Making sure that we're addressing the playing surfaces and having specific consideration for the right type of court, whether hardwood for basketball or Terraflex for volleyball, making sure that we're taking into consideration the user groups that are coming in, and making sure that from a demographic standpoint, certainly there's enough from a community standpoint to support operations and see this as a functioning, supportable complex on a year-round basis. Really, there's a lack of tournament quality facilities, as we alluded to, throughout the community, throughout the regional marketplace. This could be a destination for sports tourism just by virtue of the fact that we don't have any other we don't have options outside of Myrtle Beach and some of the other communities in the area. This really could be a destination opportunity for a variety of different sports and activities. Also an opportunity to better serve the local community. Really, again, we don't have that critical mass of courts right now. The schools are overburdened in their gyms. Providing this as an asset to the community is a tremendous opportunity to enhance the quality of life to our area residents. And then lastly, this concept being a high-impact year-round complex. We've got the sports that are going on, an indoor sports complex, primarily with these sports are being participated in during the winter and spring months. But with the weather that we have, there's a lot of people that are still looking to train and participate in basketball and volleyball in the summer months. Sports are becoming much more year-round. We can't, the weather that we have down here, being able to be inside and still continue to practice and train and participate in tournaments and camps and clinics is a nice opportunity down here in this market. So at the end of the day, we ended up modeling two different development scenarios, one with an indoor track and one with without the indoor track, both having 12 courts, 6 hardwood, 6 sport court. The hardwood, again, is better for basketball. The Terraflex, the synthetic courts, better for volleyball. They're just easier on your knees. And since you're not trying to bounce a ball in volleyball in the first place, it's much better to save your body with that Terraflex facility. 35-foot ceilings, drop-down nets to be able to have some flexibility with sports that are being offered, pro shop, equipment shop, fitness, and certainly hospitality. One of the things that we consistently hear is that people are looking for the overall experience and quality of experience as they're coming in. They want to feel comfortable, know that they can grab something to eat in between games. They know that they've got some space to go and sit and relax in between games. Teams have space for meeting rooms. Officials have their own dedicated space where they can get away from the action and make sure that they're safe and in a quiet environment in between games. And from an operator standpoint, making sure that they've got some office space there to manage everything that's going on. As we work with CHA to design and to come up with some conceptual designs and order of magnitude cost estimates for this space, we really settled on 2 different options. And Patrick, would you like to discuss the?
Yes. So with the 2 options, both of these have 12 courts. In option 1, you basically have a 6-court cluster that is near the front. That's in kind of the see up there. That would be closest to the entrance to the facility, and then behind that in the blue is your indoor, 200-meter indoor track. It also has 6 courts back there. You've got 3 that would be unencumbered by the, 4 that would be unencumbered by the track surface, but 2 of them would actually overlay the track surface. So you could not do really basketball or a court type option while you were using the track. So, so that's the option number 1. Option number 2, you have 12 courts in one facility. Those would have netting systems that would come down to separate the courts so that you wouldn't have crossover between them. In both options, there is opportunity for what we call an arena court that would allow you to have we would have bleacher seating that would be at the edges that could be pulled out, so that if you had a tournament, then basically your final games would be on the arena court, which would have much better seating on it and allow you to have a little bit nicer facility. So both of those options are in there. Outside of that, in the support spaces, we do have support spaces. We've got a fitness center that's in there. We have 4 multi-purpose rooms that could be used on a community level, but could also be used as a team room in between games. If you needed a space for teams to go to meet with their coach, you could use them for many, many different things, sort of like the multi-purpose room that's at Memorial Stadium. It would allow you to do a lot of different things with that. Of course, there would be locker rooms in there. There's a kitchen facility that's in there, catering kitchen, so that you could support the facility. There's also concessions and everything in there. This was designed in mind that if you wanted the facility to also be an emergency shelter, it could be converted to that, so that during hurricane emergencies, you could use it as a shelter facility, and then it would be equipped with emergency generator in there for power, and then also it would be set up so that food could be brought in and water could be brought in, and that could all be distributed very easily. So that was sort of the programming and thought behind both of the options. Basically, we looked at about a unit cost of about $350 a square foot for the building structure itself. We then looked at the site costs that would be required. Both of these would need about a 12-acre site for development. That includes space for parking, stormwater, and then also your utility infrastructure in there. And so that was all put into sort of the estimate. We then have added on top of that a design and construction contingency of 15%, and then also we put in escalation of 15%, just because we don't know exactly when this would be built. So we want you to have some comfort and some conservative numbers to work from for the two options. Option one is a little bit more. It's about 82 million, and then option two is 74 million, and that's all based on just the difference in square footage between the two facilities. With the track, you're at about 160,000 square feet. With just the 12 courts, you're at about 143,000 square feet.
Question? So, you're saying 72 million to 84 million. That's the amount of the investment. Of course, we just got done talking about all we've given the city already. And if we do this, the hotel, motel, they're gonna get all of that. I don't know that we have facilities in the county that can bring about revenue to help us to retrieve some of this money back. And being the devil's advocate, you know, the city getting the hotel motel tax, I'm looking at, do we get commitments from these partners before we do any of this? You're talking about all these other people who you partner up with that come in with pickleball and the tournaments and all of that. Do we go about getting commitments from these people and from the community? Because from the way I look at it, it's really benefiting the city a big time.
Well, and just to, and we'll get into site selection here, but, you know, the county unincorporated Chatham has very few hotels. So our hotel motel tax is minimal. But there are other sources of revenue that I think we can look at when we decide where we would site it.
And how do we generate revenue? I mean, is it just from the concessions?
It's gonna be sales tax, you know, it's sales tax, hotel motel tax, and,
You said that was minimum.
well, the hotel motel tax is minimal, but sales tax is one of the key things that we'd be looking at, people coming in and spend money.
And I would just, if I can, I would ask to put a hold on your question just for a moment, because Joe will get into some of that as he gets into the business pro forma, and then how all of this plays out.
Yep.
That may help answer the question.
Thank you.
Importantly, a big takeaway from this, as we look at the two different sites and upfront cost, that is a capital cost that we would have to maintain, but then there's the ongoing operational cost or potential profit in terms of managing these complexes that we would look at as to consider this. And between the two options, one of the things also to note, the indoor track, one of the challenges is that it limits our market and the opportunities to bring in some of the basketball and volleyball and indoor court users, because we're dedicating that indoor track space to those user groups. Additionally, it's a larger facility, so it does cost roughly $12 million, $10 million more to construct. Similarly, it would cost more to operate because you've got more gross square footage of space to maintain that on an annual basis. We'll get into some more of the costs here in a moment, but I did want to chat real briefly about some of the different sites that we looked at in terms of the opportunities for developing this. We were looking at 7 different locations throughout the county with potential opportunity for developing a space of this nature. Typically, we're looking for something that's got at least 12 acres of space that'll account for the entire footprint of the complex itself, as well as the parking and ingress and egress and other civil site work that would be needed on the location in order to maximize the opportunity for developing this space. Some of the factors that we look at in terms of trying to identify the ideal, the optimized site, revolve around the site and the cost of acquisition. Is it some property that we own already? If we do need to acquire it, is it possible to acquire it? And so is there, what's the level of cost that we need to incur? Accessibility to infrastructure. If we are, again, this is not an anchor complex that if we put into the ground, all of a sudden we're going to naturally see all of this development up and around. What we want to do in terms of siting this is located in such an area where we've got access to be able to better enhance some of the hotels and restaurants and retail and other economic activity that's going on in the county, to help bolster that further and help grow that sales tax base to help pay for the investment that we're making as a community.
Going to the city.
Taking a look at proximity to restaurants, hotel inventory, and overall the site visibility. Can people find this location? Are people able to access it directly off the highway? You don't necessarily need to see it off of the highway as long as your GPS can get you there, but can you get to the space easily and can you get in and out of it? Are there multiple access points? So when we've got large tournaments, we've got large population centers that are coming in and out, are they able to get in and out easily and quickly? Do we have any challenges with respect to emergency service access in and out of the space, and how do we best design the complex in order to be able to do so? So taking all those factors into consideration, we worked each one of the 7 different locations through a detailed scoring matrix that outlines each of 18 different criteria based off of a weighted scale in terms of the importance and relevance in terms of citing this location. Each criteria is scored on a scale of 1 to 5 relative to the other 6 complexes throughout the community that were identified. And from that, we identified really 3 primary candidates for potentially locating this complex at Tom Triplett Park, at Port Wentworth, in conjunction with some potential development of some outdoor community recreation and sports tourism space, and at South Chase, in terms of just both the access from a sports tourism standpoint for people to be able to get to the space, but also thinking about it from a community standpoint. As we're looking at each of these locations, we want to keep in mind that people that are coming for games and practices Monday through Thursday are leaving from work, picking kids up from school. We want to have a location that's easily accessible within maybe a 5, 10, 15-minute drive at most for them to be able to make sure that they're able to get to their games and practices on time. On the weekends with the sports tourism and tournament activity, being able to have good access off the interstate highways is critically important as well. And as we're locating this and as we're citing this and going through the scoring matrix, these were some of the factors that we took into consideration. Some of the ones that were a little bit lower on the list, the Armory site, one of the challenges that we have there, it's a great site from a market standpoint. There's a tremendous opportunity, but if we were to locate a venue there, it's my understanding that we would have to rebuild the Armory somewhere else in the community, which just adds to the capital cost of investment up front that we would have to incur. Locations such as Hutchinson Island or the school area are more remote, don't have as great of community access points. There are some synergies that we could have on Hutchinson Island with the convention center and some of the operations there. The challenge is that if the convention center is operating as its own economic engine, we may want to consider letting it go and continue to build that up as its own dedicated space, especially if we want to have this as not only a sports tourism asset, but also a community recreation space. We may have too much traffic, too many challenges from a community standpoint to invest into something that's really an area that's heavily focused on that tourism aspect to be able to maintain the operations from a Monday through Thursday, a community standpoint, in terms of traffic, in terms of ingress, egress, in terms of accessibility from the community. As we're looking at this and thinking about overall operations of the complex, making sure that we do have some control from a community standpoint is going to be critically important. But we also realize that we may not necessarily have the expertise in the area to reach out and to attract all these tournament operators, and participants. Working with a third-party private manager is something that was heavily noted among many of the most successful sports tourism complexes that we analyzed throughout our comparable facility analysis. In chatting with them, making sure that there is a direct link back to the Parks and Rec Department, back to the county, so that we as a community still have oversight and management in terms of the vision and the direction as to which we're operating that space, so that at the end of the day, we're not only generating the benefits from an economic standpoint, but we're also making sure that we've got that control from a community standpoint. These are things that as we went through and started modeling this out and started generating the pro forma in terms of overall attendance levels, in terms of activation, community standpoint, from a league, practice, camp, clinic standpoint, from a tournament standpoint, that we took into consideration to make sure that we're optimizing the program that we're looking at. As we took a look at the two different complex models, one with indoor track and one without, one of the first things that we noticed that we would anticipate seeing a much higher level of attendance at the complex without indoor track, one of the dedicated indoor sports complex, just because we have greater access for leagues and practices throughout the year, where we wouldn't have to hold that space for indoor track usage on a regular basis. As we're looking at the financial operations, as we created the pro forma for the annual ongoing operations of the complex, similarly, with not only having a larger venue, but also having somewhat less overall utilization, we would anticipate close to a $500,000 operating deficit with a 200-meter indoor track component to the complex. Whereas with the dedicated 12-court indoor complex, we would anticipate a moderate profit upon stabilization. Now, there's going to be a ramp-up period of a couple, 2, 3, 4 years where we would anticipate seeing potentially some operational losses in those first few years as we're bringing in those tournaments. Many of them are booked out for 4, 5, even 10 years out, in waiting for our turn-in location to give them an opportunity to come to Chatham County with their tournaments, but also getting a chance from a community and a regional standpoint for people to change their habits in terms of where they're going for games, for tournaments, for practices, for camps, for clinics, and being able to build that up over the first 3 or 4 years of operations. But once we're at that level of stabilization, we would anticipate seeing a pretty substantial operating deficit with that 200-meter indoor track, whereas with a third-party operator working with the community and the county, we'd anticipate seeing a modest profit in terms of annual operations. And in terms of the overall economic benefit, and this is the reason why many communities throughout the country are investing into a complex of this nature, is new dollars, new visitation, the new spending that would come into the community on an annual basis. We'd anticipate seeing with an indoor court complex roughly $16 million of new spending of dollars that don't exist right now in Chatham County being spent in this community on an annual basis. With re-spending, with induced spending, with the money that is now being brought into the community, the jobs that are being created, those dollars that are being spent throughout and re-spent throughout the market, the overall economic benefit, we would anticipate being somewhere north of $27 million each year. We would expect that between the jobs at the complex and throughout the community at the various hotels, restaurants, retail outlets, and tour operators and other visitor industry and other community-related operations, we'd anticipate seeing roughly 350 annual full and part-time jobs being supported just by investing into a complex of this nature, and the dollars that would be ultimately spent within the community by virtue of the investment that we're talking about. So that's the rationale, and that's the analysis that we've kind of walked through in terms of outlining why this makes sense or why this may make sense for Chatham County to invest in and as a potential opportunity both to enhance quality of life for the local community and generate that economic benefit back to the community. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you may have. I know there's a lot of information.
Let me get you in order now, so who's up? All right, Commissioner Farrell's up, then Commissioner Whiteley. Commissioner Milton still has a question on from your previous question on the table.
Yeah, I'll listen to see if what I have to ask will get answered. If it doesn't, then I'll.
Okay, then let's go to Commissioner Farrell.
I probably have a lot of questions, but I'll just put one out there. When you were doing your analysis, one of the things that I was looking at was the impact on the local youth not having to travel to these remote locations in Columbia, South Carolina, Jacksonville, Florida, Atlanta, Charlotte, North Carolina, or whatever. I didn't hear you mention anything about that part of the presentation that, yeah, we're drawing people from all over the Southeast, I would think, to come here as a destination. I think a lot of people desire to come to Savannah for a multitude of reasons, and this would just give them one more reason to come visit Chatham County. But what does your data suggest about the benefit to the local youth? We have a population of roughly 300,000 in this county, and that they don't have to travel so far to participate at a higher level in whatever their chosen sport may be, whether it be basketball or badminton or what have you.
Yeah, that's a great point, Commissioner. And it is, again, the quality of life, not only from games, practices, camps, clinics that people can attend during the week, but the typically what you would see is somewhere between 30 and 40% of those tournament participants are going to be local user groups, ones that, like you're saying, are traveling now to Atlanta, to Myrtle Beach, to Virginia Beach, to all points outside of this community, because we don't have anything more than a 4-court complex in order to be able to host these tournaments.
Do we have any economic impact numbers of how much money it could save families by having this complex located in Chatham County versus nothing at all? In other words, return on investment, I believe there's a matrix there to measure that economic impact. That, yeah, we're looking at some big numbers to put this here. It's not all about filling hotels in this city or that city within the county. But, you know, how does that impact a wallet of mom and dad who has a child that's excelling at volleyball or cheer or whatever?
Yes, sir. And that's a great question. We candidly, we get that all the time with these studies. And I will say that the approach that we take to projecting the economic impact that we would realize by investing into this type of a project does not include the dollars that we're going to be keeping here by not letting people come out. So that would be an added benefit, an added quality of life benefit back to the community beyond the numbers that we're projecting here. And the reason that we don't do that, candidly, is as we are projecting economic impact, we want to make sure that we're holding constant the dollars that would typically otherwise be spent in the community today. So we're assuming that folks that are in the community already are not contributing to that $27 million of economic benefit that we would be afforded by investing into this product, because we're assuming that they're going to be buying their groceries here in town already. They're going to be spending entertainment dollars at their movie theaters and going out and going to restaurants and bars and nightclubs and spending their dollars elsewhere in the community in ways other than just on sports tourism. So that economic benefit is not specifically accounted for in that $27 million.
Well, I guess my question would be, if it's possible and you have the resources to do it, if you could generate a data-driven number that would say, if you do this, it will benefit, you know, you mentioned economic, you know, income levels of the local folks that live within so many miles of the county or what have you. How does it impact them? Because as a commissioner, I'm asked to invest, you know, a large sum of money and resources, human resources and financial resources to this project. That to me is a return on investment that is very meaningful to my constituents and all the people in this community that'll be helping to pay for it. But there'll be a benefit there, and that would be a number that would be very interesting. Maybe it could just be its own little page. It doesn't have to be baked into the other data that you have here.
Yeah, we can look into something like that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wagner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So thank you. This is great. I'm excited to see it. Been waiting for it for a while. So one question I have, when you talk about the options of management, third party versus owner management, right? In your discussion and work with other clients, what were some of those pros and cons that you heard as it relates to that?
So some of the challenges with a third-party manager, and I'll start with that because it does come at a cost. The building operations, the capital investment from a community standpoint still is on the community itself. A third-party manager is not coming in and taking over operations at their own gain or loss. We still have to pay any operational deficit or realize any operational benefit from the complex. Additionally, there is a fee for their services to come in and use this third-party operator and leverage their expertise, their Rolodex of contacts, and their management know-how and their database of general managers, directors of sales, directors of operations, staff people to open, manage, and operate the complex. But that's the benefit that we're being afforded, is that expertise from a nationwide standpoint, where you've got dedicated individuals that have grown through managing and operating these complexes elsewhere throughout the country, where they've got, from a national database standpoint, a list of different organizations that are participating in these tournaments that they can directly call to understand, to generate the interest in participating in these tournaments, either if we're owning and operating them ourselves, or if we're reaching out to third-party operators to manage these tournaments through their gain or loss. Furthermore, the buying power. They're managing a variety of different complexes throughout the region, throughout the country, being able to go back to these tournament organizers and say, we have an opportunity for you down here, but we also realize that you're bringing in people from different areas throughout the country. We feel that this is a tremendous opportunity, and being able to leverage the buying power, not only from attracting those tournaments, but just sourcing the staffing and operating of the complex. The ideal situation is one in which we've got somebody here in the local community that has all of the contacts, that loves this community, has grown up in this community, is not moving anywhere anytime soon, and has that knowledge-based and know-how to operate a complex of this nature. As these facilities continue to evolve, as the prevalence and the competition for sports tourism continues to increase throughout the region, throughout the country, that contact base, that knowledge base, that experience base really is becoming much more thin throughout the area. Furthermore, as we're looking at it that's really focusing on the sports tourism aspect, but they also understand the importance of working with communities, and they've done this in many cases throughout the country, where they are able to understand the balance between that sports tourism and that local community importance, and making sure that how are we pricing this complex in order to meet the goals of the community. We certainly don't want to go out and start renting out the complex at $1,000 a day to the local basketball organizations, because we're going to start pricing them out of the market very, very quickly. So how do we deal with understanding the dynamic pricing models that we would need to employ in order to be able to meet both the needs of the local community, the non-local community, and realizing the overall operational benefits of the complex financially and economically.
Okay, thank you. Now, in those projections, the financial projections, did any of these numbers that were the two options for the two facilities, was owner-operated versus third-party operated? Does it pose any significant difference in operating costs?
I would anticipate that the projections that we laid out did assume a third-party private operator for both scenarios.
Okay, gotcha.
We projected. I would anticipate lower revenue and likely potentially higher operating costs, and that's if we were to go with a publicly owned and operated model. That's typically what we see with publicly owned, operated facilities throughout the country, is an operating deficit for any type of facility. In often cases, many, multiple six figures, high six figures of an operating deficit for a complex like this.
All right, so when it came to the option one versus option two, and we saw that there was going to be lesser revenues, and you may have gone over this and I may have kind of missed it, but I'm trying to wrap my head around if we have the ability to offer another sport, how does that translate to less dollars, even though we'd still have, it looks like an additional 5 courts, under that track. Yes, they wouldn't be hardwood, but tournaments that are played, I'm speaking as a subscriber, we've played major tournaments, $400 a team on that synthetic flooring. So how does that translate to less revenues, even though we have the ability to offer another sport?
It's a great question and very valid. Part of the challenge is, number one, is with the participation rates that we see with indoor and even outdoor track relative to those of basketball combined with basketball, volleyball, wrestling, martial arts, all of the different other activities that could potentially go in there. There's a lower participation rate that we typically see with that track element. Furthermore, in terms of operating that space, now you're taking up the entirety of roughly 6 courts to be able to rent it out to just one sport. Whereas if you've got 6 courts that can either be dedicated to one sport or multiple sports overlapping, you have a greater opportunity to utilize that and be flexible with that utilization. One of the challenges is that you do have to set this space up ahead of time and can't just flick your wrist and turn it into an indoor track versus a basketball court versus a volleyball court. And in order to be able to accommodate the different user groups, really having that dedicated space is going to help optimize what you're trying to accomplish within your venues.
Got you. And so I know you mentioned speaking with a indoor track operator up north, and that they said, if given the opportunity to make this investment, would they do it? Had you had that same conversation with any of these indoor track operators in the South?
We reached out to a number of the indoor track operators in the South, and more so we spoke to the user groups in the southern region. And the feedback that we got from them was that they would love a 200-meter indoor track, but they're more likely to use an outdoor 400-meter track, especially if the weather is nice. The ones that we see as being most successful, as I alluded to, really are ones that have the university presence or a dedicated team and a funding source to absorb the operational deficit that you're going to incur.
I understand that. And my last question, when you were weighing the options of sites, was there any weight or points given given for public transportation access? Because when I look at these sites, and when we talk about the community being able to utilize them, access to public transportation may be a need. Was there any weight or points given to that? I didn't necessarily see it here.
The existing public transportation access was not directly considered. However, in considering the overall accessibility of the site from a highway and roadway standpoint, we assume that if there is a development of this need, of this type of space, and the opportunity to reposition some of the public transportation options within the community, that the accessibility of the site would lead into the opportunity to have access from public transit.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, Commissioner Lockett.
Sir, what is the possibility of a named sponsor? Have you experienced any of that?
There are opportunities. A third-party private operator tends to have a greater opportunity to leverage some of their buying power in terms of bringing in those third-party naming rights operators. I will say the benefit of, the financial benefit of having that corporate sponsorship is typically somewhat limited. I mean, even looking at End Market Arena and the sponsorship revenue that they generate from that agreement is while substantial, is a small portion of their overall annual budget that they need to recover on an annual basis. So it is certainly an opportunity, but it's not necessarily one that I would anticipate being a significant source of revenue for complex operations.
Thank you.
What range do you think it would go for? Off the cuff.
It's really, it really depends on the market. I would say that the Chatham County marketplace, considering the corporate base that we have and the economic presence that we have, I think that there would be an opportunity to be toward the higher end of that, of a range in terms of generating that sponsorship, and in terms of the likelihood of being able to generate a sponsor interested in supporting this type of a complex. But you're probably talking somewhere in the tens of thousands of dollars on an annual basis, maybe low six figures.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kicklight, do you have any questions? He's not there anymore?
No, sir, I don't.
All right. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Let me ask you a few now. When you were looking at revenue streams, and I'm looking at the 7 sites you have on here, one part of that was about hotel, motel. That, all right. None of this is in unincorporated, unless you go on size. So therefore, we couldn't take advantage of hotel, motel tax
That would be
money.
for the community.
None of this, right?
For the whole community, there is a benefit.
I understand that, but I'm talking about when you're counting the revenue, where the money gonna come from. You can't, I mean, we could overload hotels, but none of that money would come to the county, right? Except that the business paying taxes, but I'm not talking about that, I'm talking about hotel, motel. You mentioned hotel, motel, that's why I asked, I wanna make sure you're clear that the hotels around here, if they're not in unincorporated Chatham, we get no hotel from that, all right? All right, I just want to make sure that's clear. Yeah.
To that point, I think that, I don't think we can automatically make that assumption. Because we're already a tourist location, right? If all the hotels are taken up, let's say downtown, regardless of where we put this, if all the hotels are taken up, when teams come, they gotta stay somewhere. So if all the other hotels are taken up for other tourist attractions, then perhaps the unincorporated hotels could be used. Additionally, a lot of times what I've experienced is when we go to these tournaments, they'll say they're a state of play a state of play tournament, which means you have to book through the hotels that they tell you to. So we could ultimately, in agreement with renting out the facility for tournaments, say, if you are gonna host this, if you are gonna have, a tournament here, these are some of the hotels that you must use. So we can, to some degree, drive traffic to that. And this weekend, I know of a tournament that's going on where if you're coming from out of town, they're saying they want you to book through these specific hotels, and all those hotels are booked up. So there still ends up being overflow elsewhere. But I just wanted to say, I don't think that we could definitively assume that unincorporated hotels won't get revenue because of tournaments coming in town.
Okay, that's not what I said. I was just talking about, I'm looking at the locations, all right? And the locations, none of these locations are in unincorporated, even though we own the property.
Well, Whitmarsh.
Whitmarsh would be.
Oh,
Right, yeah, Whitmarsh would be.
Not the only one.
But the rest of them are not, right?
Right.
Okay, so that was my point, all right? Let me go on to, the other thing I want to ask before we can move on, is that, you're projecting, the cost, okay, as being 74 million and 82 million, right?
Sir?
All right,
84, 72.
74 I got on here.
Is he the same?
82 and 74, right?
A whole lot of money.
Yeah. But let me, I'm asking, here's my question. This is projected how far out? You're not gonna build it tomorrow,
He already,
all right? So how far are these projections out? 5-year projections, or 10-year projections, or what?
I would say within the next 5 years.
Within,
From a
okay.
construction standpoint. I mean, escalation costs have been hard to nail down.
You can't nail them down.
You can't nail them down. I mean, we've had some years where it's 15% in 1 year's time. And our estimators have looked at it, and they assumed a construction start a way out, about a year out, and they came up with around a 7% escalation. I bumped that up to 15 to give a little bit of buffer.
Right.
Because just in looking at the potential timeline, obviously, there's budgeting that has to go on. You've got to go through a procurement process to hire an architect to actually design the facility. Then you've got to potentially get a third-party operator in there who would want to provide input during the design process. And then in terms of how you're looking at construction delivery, whether it's, you could do construction manager, you could do hard bid, there's all sorts of different options for that. But my point being that, you know, design itself would take a year.
Right.
So, and then you've got your permitting in there, so at best, even if you started right now, you're looking at probably not until late next year that you would be bidding.
And one of my reasons for trying to pinpoint it down was because the meeting I came from just before this one, where they're building a whole lot of the facilities for the supply chain and for Hyundai. Steel was one price yesterday at 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock this morning, there was another price. We talking about a whole lot of steel going in here, so I just want to make sure that we don't get set on. Now, the last thing I want to ask this is too, and I think this is more to the staff than it is to anyone else. Presently in SPLOST 7, right? Well, we got 3 more years?
Till 2026.
Yes.
2026, there are 3 more years. All right, so that kind of money, there's a gap between what we have in 7 and what we're talking about now. We can't talk about that gap or talk about bonding or any of those kind of things until 2026, am I right?
We have to have the design and the cost.
Right, right, okay. So I just want to make sure we understand what the gap is, okay? Right now, slated in 7, we'd have to go to 8, right?
We have to go, I think the original plan was we got money in hand for.
Design and all that. Right.
And we'd have to do some debt between when we get that design done for construction, and we have to look at paying it off in SPLOST 8.
Yeah, okay. All right, I just want to make sure we make that clear, that's all. I mean, I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, all right, but I want to make sure we know where we are as far as finances are concerned. See, and so as we plan, know that there's 17 million in 7, all right? And so we would take that to get those preliminary steps done. But when we're looking at the 74 to 82 million, that would be in 8.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just want to make sure we spell that out, that's all.
Yeah, definitely cost is a factor. I think what the gentleman just said about escalation and what you just noticed yesterday would lead us to say, if we're going to do this, we should start sooner rather than later, because sooner will save millions of dollars. Every year a delay will cost more millions. So if there's a bridge in there where we have to bond, if we get to the point where we need money and we need to bond, our credit rating is excellent, and if it costs us 5% to borrow money for a few years, it's certainly a whole lot less than 15% a year. So any way you look at it, I believe that if this is a project worthy to start, it should start as soon as physically possible. If you only looked at the financial part of it, starting sooner is much more cost-effective. But if you also factor in what it does for the youth of our community, I think that's a driving force that says this should have been built 20 years ago. So, that's my comments.
And I agree with your 20 years ago, but I'm also looking at what our financial advisors telling us now about bonding. And they tell us, am I right, they're telling us put a halt on that right now?
Proceed with caution.
Yeah, okay. That's the best way. Yes, ma'am.
And now with all of this being talked about now and we're not looking at anything happening today or tomorrow,
Right.
we have other issues that are desperately pending that we need to look at that are already issues. I don't see us just creating something else when we need to spend that money that we got now, if we can. I know that SPLOST money is allocated. So is this money that we're talking about spending, if we're gonna spend it, can it be used for anything else that we need immediately?
No, well,
There's some things that we need immediately that we keep saying we don't have money for.
Well, in SPLOST, we voted on this facility, but we got $17 million, and that 17 is gonna go for this facility, because that's what it's allocated for. But we got ways off, and what I'd like to say today is, these gentlemen, they've done a real good job of giving us the information. I've asked them to go back, and they've got some refining to do. What I would really urge the board members, as you've heard this presentation, to take this document back and kind of get me any additional questions you have. They're going to update the report and get it back to you, and then we will proceed with the vote to determine where we're going with this.
If you're gonna tweet it, and if you're gonna tweak it, all right, tweak it and get it back to him rather than just putting it in a hole. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So I wanted to ask, when it comes to our indoor athletics, Mr. Manager, do you know roughly how much we're spending to lease indoor athletic spaces at this point?
Not off the top of my head. I can get Steve to pull that together, because we really do this for basketball.
It's about $32,000.
$32,000.
We're not spending
It's
anything.
one basketball season.
Yeah, that's just basketball season, because we have facilities for other sports.
Right. So with that being said, right, 2018 was when the Recreation Master Plan was put out.
Yes, sir.
Right. In that Recreation Master Plan, it said that we had a deficit in indoor recreation space, as well as a deficit in women's sports, like volleyball. So I want to say to my colleagues, yes, we must proceed with caution, but if we continue to say, or if we allow the potential financing to not stop us from going forward with this, then we end up in the situation just like we had in our last election, where we're having to vote about SPLOST projects that were voted on in the 90s that didn't get done. So if we don't move forward with something, if we don't start with something, then we're just going to end up letting the public down again. So I think it's important for us understanding that we're spending money for indoor spaces now, and there is a potential that we can use an indoor space not only for athletics but other uses, that we go forward with this in some way or another, whether it be the preliminary planning, and actually getting some even more serious figures. But for us to just put this off, I do not want to be part of the group that could have but didn't later.
You already
You part of the group that gotta fix what was put off.
Oh yeah,
That's
true.
where we are now.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't want
you have
us
to understand
be
it. But
people
here,
to talk about us like we're having to think about.
But here's where we are with this right now. Okay, you've got that $17 million. Okay, we can start all the preliminaries with the $17 million we have to get to the point where we can. All right, but I just didn't want anybody to think that because we had this today, we're gonna start tomorrow. That's my point.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. No, I don't want to shut it down. I want it to go forward, and I want us to take what we have. The next part is for us to agree on option one, option two, okay? Then from option one, option two, we can take those dollars we already have and go to, we go to design next, all right? Go to the design phase, okay? That's the point of having this today, so that you'll know what next step is, see? And so there is, as he said, there is information we've asked them to come up with after we saw this. There's some more things we've asked them to supply us with, all right? Once those are in, what I'm saying to all of the commissioners, now, if you've got some thoughts or you got some, after you read through this more, if you come up with some second, get it to us sooner rather than later, all right? Okay, now, can we move on to the fire fee update?
Yes, sir. I'm gonna ask,
Yes, sir.
all day to come up.
All right, wait a minute.
Sorry, Mr. Kegler. Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, in terms of next steps going into design phase, it may also be prudent to consider if you guys do want to move forward with a third-party operator, to get them on board sooner rather
Yeah,
than.
well, that's a part of all the coming together.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, we on the same page.
Thank you.
All right, we ready to go to that fire fee thing?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Can we take a break? It's about to get hot in here.
Thank you, commissioners.
Sure.
Great.
Yeah, are we gonna,
Mr. Chairman.
the meet up, the lunch thing?
I looked through it, it's
We can break for a few minutes for lunch.
All right. Y'all go get your lunch and come back.
That's right.
I thought I was fasting today.
No.
I feel like I'm fasting.
No.
Fire.
Ready.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. I'm Jeannie Alday. I'm the Director of Internal Audit here in Chatham County. And I'll be giving you the information, some updates on the fire fee this afternoon. All right, so to begin with, want to talk about where we stand with the accounts that are paid in full. So on your chart, what you'll see, we give you two numbers there. First, 83% of the dollars billed have been paid. I feel like, that's been a good collection. That's 79% of the number. We've got more dollars and it means the higher dollar amounts have been collected. Any questions on that slide? Yes, sir.
What were they getting before? What percentage were they getting before?
Roughly in the 70s, about a 70%, but they didn't bill as much. So we have those. The numbers that you see in the small, on the,
What do you mean they didn't bill as much?
well, they only billed, like 7 million one year and then 9 million another year. We billed 13.2 million.
But what does that have to do with what's been turned in? I mean, in other words, are you talking about total dollar, or are you talking about total number of people that have?
Total dollars billed, we've collected 83%. They just didn't, what I was saying in prior years, there weren't as
I
many
thought you
dollars.
meant 83% of the people paid.
No, that's in that small one on the left-hand side of the accounts. You'll see 35,883 was what we had billed out, and that's adjusted for those that have been removed because they had an approved appeal or something like that. That's the number out there, and 79% of the number of people billed, or pins billed, have paid.
So,
Go ahead.
I would just like to know how we stand as far as actually collecting from homeowners.
All right, so if you want to look at your chart, we have it broken down. So for the residential, that was 26,377, and of that, we've collected 84% of the dollars billed.
But again, that's just money. That doesn't mean how many individuals have paid, correct?
And that's going to be, Alan, can you, this is Alan Cantrell. He's on, he's our senior IT auditor. He does all the data lifting for me on that.
6,053 have not paid. I mean, because the argument with Chatham Fire was that they couldn't get people to pay. So I'm curious to know how we're getting people to pay related to how they were getting people.
I think what Commissioner Stone is referring to is the collection rate. So let's talk about collection rate.
Okay.
So just for residential, that's 73.5% have paid to date.
We're billed.
Have paid in full also, not, that doesn't include partial payment.
Okay, so that's pretty close to what they were collecting, right?
Yeah, just based on residential, but we also have all the other different parcel types, like the commercial, discounted properties, homesteaded, non-homesteaded mobile homes, those also play into that as well. And that's why the dollar amount and the actual collection rate, we're about 79%.
Okay.
But we like to look at it with that dollar amount of collection, because that's a higher amount, obviously, because in the end, it's how many dollars do we actually collect back in that cover the budget rate.
But to me, it's more important that everybody pays.
Agreed.
And that's the concern. I mean, that's why we had to get into this, was because not everybody was paid. So,
Let me go to that next slide. That'll give you a little bit more information on that. Now, this is the outstanding accounts. Okay, on your next page. So that lets you know that we have 6,053 residential accounts that have not paid so far, that were billed, and then the numbers go down from there.
So that's 79% that have paid.
okay, so what are we going to do with these 6,000 that have not paid?
I'm taking the report.
I believe Recorder's Court is where we are under what we're looking at.
We're gonna start filing the cases in the next 2 weeks or so. Court. Again,
the amount of cases that you have up there is going to cause a huge thing on the courthouse.
No.
Because they would have to find dockets for 7,000 cases.
One of the interesting things, and they have in the slide, the majority of the fees that are outstanding, out of that total, it's less than $300, $300 or less. That, you know, and a lot of those are the $100, land fee, but they'll go through that as if any continues to go on.
I wonder how that compares to the individuals that they were unable to collect from. I'd just be.
Probably the same people.
That's what I'm wondering.
Land fees under CES's previous billing model were only $5. Ours is $100 flat fee. And like, to pick up on what Mr. Kegler was saying, the bulk of the unpaid falls in the 1 to 300 billing amount. Of those, 1,077 are land-only $100 bills. So just to kind of give you some perspective there. Any questions on the outstanding?
I'm curious to know what the plan is when we take them to court. Are we gonna evict them? Are we gonna take the property? Are we gonna get into real estate?
Lien on their property, is that correct, Andre?
No, we're first starting with recorder's court because we have such a large amount of cases that even if I tried to do the liens first through magistrate court, it would take us approximately 3 years to do all those liens because of the amount of paperwork you have to do and then finding court documents. What we're doing first is going through recorder's court. We will give everybody the opportunity to go ahead and pay to have their case dismissed so they don't have to go through that, but those dockets are probably going to run about 100 to 120 people per docket. The 2 dockets or 3 dockets a day. I think they've only given us 2 days to do that per week, and it's not even a full day; it's a half a day. They would still need to get their staff to do that. So we're going to start with the highest ones first. We're about 200 cases. So we'll go and go forward first. Those can be assessed a fine for not having fire protection. But in lieu of them having to do that, they pay their fire fee prior to being going to court or at court. Now, once the judge rules that they did not have valid fire protection, he could fine them up to $500 per day for not having that fire protection since the day that we sent the bill out. Those will be for the ones who owe more money. I mean, discounted $100 one. We're not really looking at that amount being done per day. It's really just enough to collect the fire fee.
And we're hoping that them standing before the recorder's court judge will prompt them to pay. I'm afraid that we're still gonna have that group that even with that are not gonna pay, and those are the ones that we gotta take the magistrate court for lien on the property.
That's correct. And that's why we're trying to bring down the numbers so we go through magistrate court. It's not gonna be a massive amount of cases on a very small docket.
So it's like right now, we're at a billing period, a new billing period. They haven't paid the old bill. They get ready to get a new bill. And they don't pay that, so the amount is doubling.
No, the next thing is violation notices go out. They've gotten 3 days.
The next thing is what?
Is to get the violation notice. The next thing will be a violation notice.
I think you're referring to the next year. We bill again in the fall.
You bill in July, right?
Good. I'm not.
June or July?
Oh, yeah, we're, yeah,
I
but.
don't think nobody gonna get no bill in no July.
August.
No, it's not gonna be July. Even though July starts a new fiscal year, it'll probably be August or September when we put out any more bills. Which honestly, we hope will give them the time to, get all this straight, right? Hopefully that's what we're aiming for, to get all this straight so we can move to the next thing, all right? How does the the lawsuit fit into this? We talking about the court.
Well, we got a lawsuit saying that our fire fee is an illegal tax. And we're saying it's a fee for service. So, it's a case of first impression in the state. There hadn't been any really other cases dealing with fire fees. There are about 25 or 30 communities throughout the state right now that are in the process of doing the same thing. There is a national problem with the ability of local government financially to pay for their fire departments. You get articles, you go online, you get articles all over the place talking about how they're gonna finance it. Some of them do a partial ad valorem tax, then a fire fee, a fire tax on the side. It's just kind of a mixed bag. Some states are shooting them down and some states aren't. What we need to do is try to win this case. And if we do not win the case, then we need to change gears and make it into a tax, one way or the other. It's gonna be inconvenient, but eventually we'll get to what will work. We're getting ready to answer, and we will file a motion to dismiss.
That's already been filed. Yeah, the motion has already been filed.
Mr. Chairman, my concern in going to I understand, Mr. Attorney, that we want to try to win so we can keep the fee structure. I think because we've seen some things uncovered with the fee structure as we've done it with square footage, let's go ahead and fix those issues that have been uncovered, but additionally, kind of ride this one out before we try to switch to a tax, because if we switch to a tax, now you have exempt properties, which is going to lower that number that we collect, and ultimately, we're trying to meet a budget that CES has, so.
You gotta deal with homestead.
Oh, and homestead exemptions too, so that, the collection rate, dollar amount is going to be significantly lower, and now we've got another fire.
Fort Wentworth, Garden City.
So if we wanted to, for instance, I've had a lot of concerns and complaints about our matrix of how they're not opposing the square footage, but they would prefer it just to be a square footage fee, not put in categories. And so I don't understand, are we going to not revisit how we did this whole thing at all?
Yes, we are.
Okay, all right.
The reason that we didn't do a straight square footage was because we would have been inundated with people appealing for 25 square feet. Or 10 square feet, and so we put it in ranges so that that didn't impact and have so many people trying to appeal for very small changes.
Just make that next box, and might not have, otherwise it's a little difficult. And I know that I've asked this question to Mr. Kegler, but I don't understand, I'm just giving you the concerns in case I have to go get my carpets. The cap on commercial, why?
And I'm gonna speak to that, I've got a slide.
Okay. And would it be in the best interest to charge a small amount for nonprofits? I mean, I don't know what other communities do, but they still have to pay like electricity, gas, water. I mean, should we look at some reduced rate for nonprofits and not just let them pay nothing?
50% now.
We do 50% on the churches, and pins that were exempt are at 50%. The schools, the houses of worship.
Okay, I was not aware of that.
And that's on you, if you go back to this slide, you'll see it's called discounted properties. So you'll see the number there of discounted properties, the ones that are paid in full, and then the ones that haven't.
So discounted or non-for-profits?
Yeah.
Okay. We're just seeing this.
Are churches in that discounted too?
Churches and schools. but
They
not
were
like a
exempt on the
nonprofit
from property
will or
tax.
something.
The next slide is just to, all the outstanding that are over, bills over $5,000, so mostly all commercial. But just wanted to kind of give you a feel for what was outstanding in those top tier categories. A lot of those have out-of-state home offices. So trying to contact and make sure we got the bill to the right person in the right place. Additional information, and on your printed slide, it'll have a different number. That should be 156 parcels of square footage have been updated. There were 85 that we removed because it was a code was for screened in areas, and these were particularly over pools, so we took those off because I'm not burning. And then 71 parcels with residential docks were removed, and the dollar figures in red are just the impact that had in reducing the billable amount. There was 157 parcels that were removed entirely. The groups of those, one were land only, and they were either like marshes or retention ponds, areas that would not burn. And then land and square footage, there were 12 that were removed. There were 14 parcels added from the original bill that were had originally been excluded but should have been included, so they got a second bill there, or a separate bill. 13 parcels were annexed by the city in January, so we only billed them at 50%. So that reduced another 2,300. And then 5 parcels of land fee removed that was taxed on improvements only. So we took the land fee off. The only thing they had was improved property. Any question on that?
I know you're about to get to the appeals information, but I had a couple of people that filed an appeal and never heard anything.
Okay, go to the next page on that, about appeals.
Okay.
All right.
Ms. Alday?
Yeah.
Can you go back to that last piece? You said that the land fee was removed, but I thought pretty much everybody got the land fee.
Because the pen didn't include land, but when it was originally billed, it looked like it had land, but they were only being charged. For instance, a hunt club may lease property, but they don't own the land. Somebody else was billed for the land, but they would only be charged for the buildings that they had constructed.
More like a mobile home.
The land was getting a piece of
We really have to through this whole process before you leave that. And they're running down the square footage, so, you know, they've been very busy, but very helpful to the George Media this process.
Thank you, very happy to help. Commissioner?
Yes, ma'am. On those parcels that got annexed by the city, why do they still have to pay?
They didn't come under the city until January, and our bill goes from July to June. 50% of the year they go under our protection, CDS's protection. All right, information on the appeals. We received a total of 984 appeals as of April 11th. 765 of those were denied, but I wanted to give you a little more information on that. 485 of those denials were due to when they were asked for more details. There was never a response, and so after 10 business days, they were put into denial bracket. So more than half of the people who filed that were eventually denied was because they never contacted us back to give us any more information. 162 were approved, and that created a little over 54,000 in invoice reduction impact. And of that, 98 were due to square foot changes. Maybe the BOA had gone out and re-looked at the square footage and saw that there was a reduction that may have dropped them into the next bracket. So 162 were approved, 38 were withdrawn by the property owner, and 19 are still open pending some engineering reviews. Question on appeals?
Commissioners, if y'all get someone that you have a question about, they say they never got a letter or anything, just get us that information and we'll look at it.
One of them.
I can.
I filed an appeal, and I never heard back.
Should have gotten a response email that just said, send in more information.
I will say that Corinthia has been, I've been funneling that stuff to Corinthia, and all the citizens that I've talked to afterwards are extremely delighted with how she's been handling it. So she's definitely knocking it out the park. I want to state that for the record.
Okay. The next page is on some considerations for the 2024 billing, and this speaks to that categories above 50,000 square foot. So what we just did, and this is just one option, we just threw some numbers out there that may or may not be where you want to land, but right now we stop at a category 11, and that's 50,000 and above. I want to first of all point out that there are only 89 properties that are 50,000 or above. So we're talking about a very small number, which when you get to that, changing anything doesn't really impact the overall numbers billed very much. But we just put out there some modeling ideas, going to 15 categories and just jumping those categories by 100,000 square foot, because usually we're in commercial properties at this point. And then just associated some incremental fees out there going from like 10 to 15, 20, 30, 35. And you can see the number of properties that are in there. So in those top in category 14 and 15, we're only talking about 9 properties. So, and there's no property that goes over 500,000. The largest square footage we have is 473,000, just under that. But in this particular model, and of course it can be modeled anyway, it would increase our billing of 385,000 total, just breaking it down a little more in those larger square footage categories. Any questions on just that modeling?
I've never been comfortable with the modeling of the brackets, and this is a big example of why. Let's say you look at bracket 11 at 50,000 square feet for $10,000, and bracket 12 is 100,000. Well, you know, the guy with, I don't know, just once you start taking each property and you divide the square footage and you come up with the dollars per square foot, there's a wide range of different prices property owners are paying. And I've had a lot of pushback from that very perspective. It's like, if I've got 6,010 square feet, I pay this much and it's so much a square foot. If I've got 5,995, I pay this much and it's a significantly different amount. So, you know, yes, people are going to appeal for whatever reason, but you know, I believe that the commission had originally asked staff to go on total square footage, find us where everybody pays the same per square foot, whether you have 478,000 square feet or 278 square feet. Each person is paying the same dollar amount per square foot. And I think that we need, if we're going to stay with this model of square footage and a fee, that we need to get back to the principle that this commission had asked for in the beginning, that everybody pays the same. It's a fairness issue. It's an issue that people especially the ones that are caught in that next category, are livid about. And I don't want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of a fair system that handles everybody fairly. And if it's a little bit, it can't be that much more work. We've been working, the assessor's office has been working all year updating things. You know, it's a valid point that people do appeal if they think that their square footage is wrong, because that's their money. And I get that. You know, I watch my dollars, and everybody in this room, I assume, watches how they spend their paycheck. So that's what I have to say.
Certainly, if that's what the board wants to do, we can go down that road. The only reservation, not reservation, the only issue that staff has, and we've talked about that, is, you know, the appeals process. And the only thing staff can go on is what the Board of Assessors has on record. So if we do that, we're going to have to go by what's in the record. And
That's what we're doing now.
well,
we want to do.
Folks are appealing, and they, you know, we've sent them out a lot, and the example you gave where, you know, they were right over the next level, you know, you're splitting hairs for 5 or 10, so we can model it, but what I'm saying is, I think we are,
We'd have to add resources.
I mean, it's, because they're going to be going out
Yeah.
and doing a whole lot more appeals than we got now, is what we're saying.
So it's less time consuming.
Well, I mean, it's going to be more time consuming, but we can certainly put that model out there for you. We'll have it.
I'd like to see that model, because to me, I agree with Commissioner Farrell, what's fair is fair.
Once a person agrees to their assessed square footage, it's over. You're gonna have, you know, and if you get it right, the first year, that's great. If it's the second year or the third year, but at some point, it's gonna be over. I mean, there's gonna be a meeting of the minds between the Board of Assessors, the county manager's office, and the property owner, and that issue's gonna be over. And like I say, the pushback I've got was phenomenal about how these brackets, especially the 6,000 to 10,000 bracket, was just a leap too far, you know.
Yeah, we could look at that bracket, we could look at breaking that down. Too. That would be another option.
Let Amy go ahead and answer.
Well, as one of the call takers, I've answered a lot of calls, and a lot of the people, what we were basing our fee on was burnable square footage. And what they know to be their livable square footage in their house could be different than their burnable square footage, because we were including pagodas, sheds, porches, docks, yeah.
I mean, not
Well,
docks.
no, not docks. Porches, decks, and garages. And so, many people disputed, oh, you're charging me because I have a roof over my screened-in front porch? And so, I think it would increase the number of people that appeal, because they know what their square footage is, their livable square footage, but they don't realize that we're adding it on for all the burnable areas as well.
Well, with the advent of high-speed computers, could you give us an option of livables, of heated square footage, which is a number, I think, you make a good point. Most people think their square footage is that heated part, and come up with a so much per square foot of heated. Give us the commission the option to mull it over how we want to do it. At the end of the day, we want a process that's workable with staff and that's workable with property owners, and that gets the funding to keep the fire department
I think by
in working order.
having it coordinate with the residential square footage might be a better option, because they know what that is, basically.
And if, you know, and if that extra square footage, because they built a nice, Goda or whatever out in the backyard, and now all of a sudden it jumped them from 6,000, under 6,000 square feet to the 6,000 to 10,000, and it cost them hundreds and hundreds of dollars. It's causing some headaches and some pushback, and, you know, my goal as a representative of the people is to represent them and to hear their issues and to try to be the go-between between staff and the constituents. So I'd like to see that as a model, but I think we really need to get back to everybody pays the same per square foot. The guy has 10,000 square foot, he's gonna pay 10 times more than the person that owns 1,000 square foot. And whatever that matrix is, it's gotta be consistent. You know, if it's livable square footage or total burnable, you know, obviously the total burnable is causing a lot of issues. So maybe the livable is a more acceptable and we'll have less pushback. You know, because people have to understand there's a new concept and how to do that. And I think it's imperative that we come up with something that's viewed by the vast majority of property owners as fair to all. Because I've got the other problem of people coming to me and say, Pat, I got pushed up in this bracket, yet this guy that's got 400,000 square foot of an apartment, he's paying, you know, a penny a square foot, and I'm paying 15 cents a square foot. So this huge disparity, and of course everybody points out the extremes, and that's what they compare what they're writing the check for. And I think if we can get to the point where everybody is paying their fair share, I think we'll have a whole lot better buy-in from the folks that are paying for this fire department fee.
Start working on that. The last one we just have in here, just some FY '24 considerations. The first one was being able to reduce the fees a little, build a little. It's not a lot of money, but CES does collect some fees for motor vehicle accidents, fire alarms, MOUs, and some hazmat response. So being able to include that, to reduce. And then we also may need to look at an uncollectible amount in that we have deceased owners, out-of-state owners, and unable to locate owners. So there is going to be a portion that even though we want to go to court, we're never going to be able to collect it.
And those aren't the final numbers for that, is it?
No, that was just some considerations to put out there for looking at FY '24 as we look at what's been uncollected so far.
Well, I'll offer some pushback to that. I don't think it's wise for us to reduce the rates based on a maybe. They may collect that, they may not. Oftentimes that stuff can get tied up in litigation. They may not collect some of those fees for a while as it relates to traffic accidents and things of that nature. Not to mention, our agreement with them is for them to provide a service. Whenever you sign a contract, you know, it's not like you're saying, oh, well, we think you might get this, so we're going to base this contract based on what we think you may make elsewhere. That agreement between the county and CES, I think it's important for us to just honor it based on the need and the service that they're providing. But to say, well, you're getting other revenues elsewhere, you know, we wouldn't tell any other business that we're not going to pay Comcast because they make other money somewhere else. You know, we pay the bill for the service that they provide.
And these are just some things that we're throwing out. As y'all indicated, we're going to bring back, you know, some other suggestions, and certainly the per square footage fee will be in there, along with some other things for your consideration. And we, as the chairman indicated, we probably won't send the next round of bills out till maybe August, maybe 1st September.
And these bills will contain these adjustments you're talking about?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you're gonna have to modify the ordinance for any of this. So we'll have to do that. That'll take a couple of readings.
Who will be sending the bills out? Somebody from out of state or something?
It'll look a whole lot different.
Chatham.
It'll look a whole lot different. We changed the format, and it has a Chatham County seal on it and the Chatham County address. So we learned a lot. So it'll look different. There will be no guessing that this comes from Chatham County.
Will we be using a third party still though?
We're still going to use the third party for the next round for collections, but you'll be able to send it to a Chatham County address.
All right. If I could just chime in as the commission member who sits on CES on their board, there are considerations that, you know, for CES to meet their contractual obligations to the county, there's going to be certain considerations that have to be met. So I want to just kind of prepare us for that. I know some of us may have already heard some of that, but, you know, we're getting a really good deal when you look at what we're paying Chatham Emergency Services for fire service. In the grand scheme of things, especially if you compare it to some of the budgets of the municipal fire services here in our area, especially city of Savannah. But I hope we don't get a sticker shock when we have some of these things, when we take some of these things into consideration. Because again, we do have Chatham Emergency Services as contractually obligated to meet certain metrics, and we have to make sure that we as a commission, you know, are doing what we need to do to make sure that those funds are there. Now, I understand, as I've had a conversation with Mr. Manager, some of these things we are going to have to dig deeper into, but I will say that having been on the board, Chatham Emergency Services, they're not looking to, it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. They're looking to provide a good service, and I honestly think that is what's been happening. I just want to share that with y'all.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Well, we had one more item that we wanted to go through, but I think we, because of the timing, I asked Mr. Chairman if I can postpone this and maybe either do it at tomorrow's meeting or.
No, we'll pick another time.
Okay.
All right, not at the meeting tomorrow. We'll pick another time to do that, okay? So that, but in the meantime, though, they can go ahead and read through the information that they already have about the SPLOST transfer updates. Okay, and then we'll do that again now because we need to get to that other meeting.
You want to do the announcement about next week?
Oh, on Saturday, the manager and I will be leaving the country. All right, we'll be all gone. The manager and I will be gone all next week. We'll be in Korea. All right, we fly out on Saturday, and we'll be back the following Sunday. We leave there on Saturday, but we get here on Sunday. All right, so we're going to look at our investment in Seoul, Korea. All right, that's what he's talking about. Anything else?
Go to North Korea, might never
No,
see you again.
don't worry. I ain't crossing.
Tomorrow, I want to.
Nowhere near it.
Tomorrow I'll be giving you some dates on budget submittal. I want to make sure everybody's aware of that. I plan to give you the budget on May 26th, the final budget, but I want to meet with you before that to go over some things. And
so let's schedule a budget workshop.
Schedule a budget workshop. So I'll have those dates for you tomorrow.
All right. Also tomorrow, now we're gonna change timing. We're gonna have at 9. We're gonna have pre-meeting, and at 9:30 we're going to executive session, and then we'll come out after then. Okay? We're gonna change the format of what we're doing. We're not changing anything. We're just moving things around. All right. Thank you all. Have a blessed day.